And it looks like we are after hours, very after hours here on the East Coast of the United States. For myself, right outside the nation's capital, we're going. Great Jared George is with us, and Ecce Lux is also with us. We're going to be talking about what's going on here in Virginia, my home state, state of my birth, and state that a great many of my relatives fought and died for. The soil bled right into the soil that I trod on. And the anti-whites, having taken control of the governance of our country, our states, have turned it over to other anti-whites, primarily non-white anti-whites, who, as many are saying, have come into this state in a veritable deluge of humanity. Areas that, in the blink of an eye, 5 years, 10 years, literally, the landscape has utterly changed in many parts of the state, and it no longer looks like Virginia by any means whatsoever. You drive by every bus stop, and whether it's the adults or their beautiful children by the scores running out of the buses of all of these different non-white races. And of course, in a democracy, and this is something that folks, and I'm going to turn it over to Jared and Ecce right away here and get into this topic. But in a democracy, we have to remind those in our communities, those in our circles of influence, that it doesn't matter how conservative the non-white friend they have is. It doesn't matter if they're more conservative or more Republican than some of the white people they know. In a democracy, all that matters is the majorities, and the non-white communities vastly vote anti-white. Don't say Democrat, don't say leftist. They vote anti-white because these leftist or Democrat policies are just subsets of the superset that is anti-whiteism, and that these policies all adversely affect us. They impinge on the founding stock of this nation. The same thing taking place in other Western nations around the globe. And so it doesn't matter how cool or based or whatever the non-white friend is. All that matters is that in the end, when you're talking about the Asians, 75% plus, Hispanics 80% plus, blacks 90% plus, Arabs 80% plus, 85% plus, vote anti-white. So you're always going to have anti-white conclusions. What changed Virginia? Our population wasn't shrinking. The white population wasn't circling the drain by any means. Many generations of people have continue to live here and work and have long histories in this state, and they are now pushed aside the same way that even mighty oaks, mighty redwoods, mighty sequoia are pushed aside by a tidal wave, just like twigs snapped by the tidal wave rushing into the shore. That is what has happened as anti-whites, non-whites rather, have been allowed to flood into the state. And as I say, as wonderful as some of these people are, in the end, they vote anti-white, and we end up with anti-white policies. We end up with what we're going to be talking about tonight, a complete white erasure of our civilization. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to these two fabulous gentlemen is this, that a lot of people are saying, boy, this seems mighty quick. You know, look at how long California inched along, and all of a sudden this is kind of happening quickly. That's the exact way erasure happens, ladies and gentlemen. It's slow at first because it's fighting the inertia of the past. It's fighting the founding stock that are still too numerous and not as easily swayed as they are in successive generations. And then it great lurches forward. That is what you will see. That was the norm. So this is my great state. I'm sitting in Virginia tonight, as I always am when I'm streaming to you all these love streams over this platform of YouTube and all of these others that we are streaming to live tonight. And it is now in the hands of non-white anti-whites who intend to disarm our people, who intend to disenfranchise us in various ways. And make no mistake, you are disenfranchised when people who are illegal are permitted to vote. You are disenfranchised every time that happens. So I will pass it over to these two gentlemen, and we will get right into this serious conversation about Virginia and what's taking place here. Jared, I give it to you.
Well, a sobering after hours. We'll try to find some silver lining in it. But welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thank you to those staying up late with us here on the East Coast. Lovely Porridge, Drew Nation Media is in the chat, and it's a good time for him down under in Australia. So I'm glad it works out for you, mate. But we're with Ecce Lux, and we've been in touch since February. I think you helped us ring in our 1 year anniversary on that very special February stream towards the tail end of about 10 hours of streaming. You joined It's Late Night Somewhere. We did all three.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, we did all three of the shows we do together on that night. It's Late Night Somewhere, of course, is the more freewheeling radio style show, which we want to have you on for that as well. Anyone that doesn't know Ecce Lux's streams, Burn After Streaming, I was tuning in, and him and I were talking a little after it last week. But he has that like late night radio, just friendly chat. You feel like you're talking to him thing down pat. And I really like your approach. It's different. It's fresh. It's not quite what anyone else is doing. And I always appreciate that when it's well done. And you're a thoughtful guy. We're glad to be in touch, and we're glad that you're here. And we know that you are in California, and this topic means a great deal to you because you have seen where this goes. So I know you have a lot to share with us tonight, and we're happy to get through all of it. But why don't you just set the scene for the first few minutes about what is going on in Virginia exactly?
All right, so the long and the short of it is that just as was discussed, the immigration has flipped Richmond, and all you have to do is just look at a demographic map to see it. So it's a major issue, and that in itself. Okay, so I want to focus mostly on Virginia, but as we all know, this is not localized to Virginia. I live in California. I watched it happen firsthand here. It started with Reagan's amnesty in the 1980s. That's how California flipped blue. Right. Once you understand that, because just as, you may have a buddy, as anyone, myself included, in a major city. You may have a buddy that is super cool, your non-white bro that's like super awesome and whatever, and that's great. But it's never about your bro. It's never about your bro. It's actually about the larger patterns. It's about the social dynamics. That's always what it's about. And a lot of people simply do not understand that. In Virginia, because I was looking at a map, and a lot of it is rural, and the diversity that happened, that was injected into Virginia, was largely concentrated in places like Richmond, with a little scattering here and there, but mostly it was just in like Richmond. And it's hard to it really is the boiling frog. I can't stress this enough. I watched all of this happen in my own city firsthand. I'm in my 40s now, so I watched the entire thing firsthand. I cannot stress this to you enough. You do not notice it until it's way too late. And then once you notice it, you're like, oh my God, this is a big deal. And the thing that needs to be focused on, I'm going to come back to this later on, but I think that with regards to Virginia, I honestly think that people need to start talking about demographics, not just in terms of Virginia, but in terms of what's going on with the rest of the country. Anyway, the gun thing is not... it's a symptom of a larger problem relative to what's just happening with us. How do I phrase this? Actually, before I go into that, let me just, because I have a little thing here where I was talking about like I wrote it out. The gun thing is actually a bushwhack, okay? And if you don't understand that the gun thing is actually a bushwhack, then a lot of things don't make sense. The reason that it's a bushwhack is because, gosh, I know you guys know all of this stuff, and I kind of feel like I'm about to start
Well,
talking.
it's
in
all right. I mean,
circles.
some people in our audience may not, and it's good to set the stage. And there's going to be people listening after.
Okay,
So
good.
we'll, even if some people know, hang with us because we're going to get to more analysis after. But it's important to set the stage.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes I hate having to explain these things because I know that like most of the people already know, but I kind of feel like by reflex I always do this anyway. So yeah, basically we're being invaded by communists. Okay, there. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, the communists, they want to basically do away with Western civilization. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, the easiest way for them to get rid of because Western civilization, you know, we have this whole thing about, you know, societies being tied to genetics. Okay, great. So Western civilization was basically made by us. All right, fine. So if there are fewer of us, then there is less of that Western civilization, which makes it much easier for the communists to take control. So all they have to do is just replace us, hence the replacement migration. Now, the wrinkle here is that once people catch on to the replacement, once people catch on to the commies, I'm using that as a proxy, but whatever. We all understand what we mean by this. Once people catch on to the commies, very, very quickly, one gets into the mindset of something needs to be done about this. And that's when pushback begins. And there have been multiple examples of communists infiltrating a society and going straight ahead Bolshevik push. I'm sure that we can think of lots of examples in the mid 1800s all the way into the early 1900s, and invariably every one of them involved violence. Not a big fan, don't want to deal with it, and I mean no one does. And the communists, the easiest way for them to ensure that their little revolt works is to make sure that everyone is defenseless against their revolt. And that's why the Virginia thing is being pushed at all. Now, when I say that I think it's a bushwhack, now that I've gotten all that out of the way, what I mean by that is they have, for the most part, been successful in getting gun ownership discouraged to the point where it's not easy to just go and pick up a pistol here in California. And if you want to get ammunition, you have to have a passport or your birth certificate. So you have to have documentation to pick up ammunition here. Okay. Second Amendment is basically a dead letter here. So we're on the same page. Connecticut, my understanding is that they have an assault weapons ban. And anyone that's over a certain age that already has them, they get to keep them. Anyone under a certain age, they don't get to have assault weapons. You know, the grandfather clause. It's the grandfather clause. And they want to do something like that with Virginia. Now, coming back to the whole bushwhack thing, they want this program in all states. They want everything banned. And they also want the ability to just unilaterally declare you unfit to have firearms, hence the red flag laws, which in other states are being called the like Women's Abuse Protection Act or something like that. So it's being hidden in other bills. And at the moment they're hiding behind women abuse. And of course, nobody likes the idea of women being abused. So to hide this clause, the red flag clause within a bill titled women abuse, that's a very cynical move on their part, but whatever, that's just how they work. I think that they decided to go for, in Virginia, the initial wording was full-blown ban on everything. So if you own it, you're now a felon, and it will be taken from you. Echoes of Beto O'Rourke's hell yes, we're coming to take them.
I thought it was more of a registry, or is it this was the first move and then the registry is the quote unquote compromise?
There you go.
Okay.
They highballed us. And a lot of people are going to take it. A lot of people have already said that it's a victory. No, they're not going to take our guns. It's a victory. We won. They're not going to take our guns. But the poison pill is that you get to keep your AR, but you must register it. Okay, so it's a registry. All right, so they're going to ban it, number one. Number two, so if you already have one, you get to keep it. Ooh, great, thanks, guys. So basically the entire next generation, no, they don't get one. If you are under 18 in Virginia right now, you will likely not be able to legally purchase a firearm according to Virginia state law. I'm not saying that is what's going to happen, but that is their plan.
What is enacted at the moment?
Nothing. Zero.
Okay. So
But
this
they
is just a
have
proposal.
correct, and they
And
have
they're
promised that
setting
they're
the
going
balloon
to.
up to test it.
Yeah, but they've already promised that they're going to.
Is there any talk
So-
about this? Because I'm learning some of this from you. Is there any talk of this if it were to happen? Have there been any rumblings of it would go to a federal level?
There have been
Supreme
numerous
Court?
cases that have been tried to push, or that have been pushed with the attempt to get them into the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court hasn't heard any cases for like a decade. There is one that's being heard right now that does refer to Second Amendment, but that's out of New York, and that has to do with carrying firearms or something like that, which has the possibility of, on a federal level, granting people the ability to bear arms, theoretically. I think that there's going to be a poison pill thrown in it. And of course, as we all know, states will openly say fie to federal rulings. I think it's Heller versus DC. It affirmed the right to keep and bear arms outside of your home. And obviously California has no interest in that. Anyway, but I want to try to focus on Virginia a little bit. Yeah, I think that there are people that would want to bring it to the federal level, but the thing is that the Supreme Court, they have the ability to say, we will not hear this case that you want us to hear. They can just reject it out of hand and say, no, we don't care. We have more pressing issues. So yeah, maybe someone wants to force it, but you can't force a thing that doesn't exist yet. The people that want to push these programs, they've already vowed that they will. But anyway, the thing is that they're trying to highball. So the idea is that they set the bar really high. Initially, everyone balks and says, oh my gosh, bans, they're going to do a magazine capacity restriction. So you'll have Kami Castrati capacity, 10 rounds. That's what Virginia is looking at. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that's their plan. So yeah, mag capacity ban.
And just to keep up, the plan is to put this through a state bill, create state legislature. Okay. And when would they be looking to do that? Is there a timetable?
Early January.
Oh, so this is moving very quickly.
Yeah. That's the goal. Whether they do or not is a separate issue. I'm saying that this is their plan. So it's important to understand that I'm talking about the projections that they are making. I'm not talking about what will happen. Okay. That said, there have been, I'm sure that anyone that's visited certain sections, certain underbellies of the interwebs, they are painfully aware that there are rumblings of Inuit igloos popping up in Virginia. And I think that some of that's LARPing, some of that's glowies and whatnot. So I don't want to take any of that too seriously, but I do, when you stop and think about it, they do have a point. Some of these people that are like, oh my gosh, we're going to form a militia. And there was a militia that was formed in, I think it was Virginia Beach or something. So like recently in response to this, so like very specifically in response to this little bill. So these things, like, they are forming, and it's incredible to watch.
Well, the big thing that hit the news is the pushback. The people in Virginia are saying, okay, if you have sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants, then we're going to do a sanctuary cities kind of situation for our right to bear arms. So how does that play into? Why don't you bring us up to speed on that news?
Okay, so this is unpleasant to say, and I don't like having to say this, so I apologize in advance. I want to throw this qualifier out there, okay? Ecce Lux is a streamer of peace, okay? I just want happiness and love and rainbows and kittens. That's what I like. But we are being forced into a situation in which we're having to be a little more delicate, because there actually are like serious things going on. And if you look at the way things are manifesting right now. And I can't stress this enough. I don't like having to say this. It's actually, it resembles fourth generation warfare, which is not fun. And if you read the fourth generation warfare handbook, I think Vox Day's Castelia House puts that out. It's a good book. Much of it focuses on, because a lot of people, they think about like light infantry or whatever, and there are a couple of chapters devoted to that, but the majority of it is actually on hearts and minds. It's actually on how to interact with the public. So propaganda, etiquette, how you treat people, how you deal with people, and so on. All politics is local, this sort of a thing. Your question of the media spinning things, that moves directly into what that handbook talks about. I do recommend that everyone read that. I'm not even joking. Again, stream of peace. Okay. They are attempting to spin it as, quote, gun owners are the real lawbreakers, end quote. And that's actually the reason why the genius move was to declare sanctuary cities for firearms owners, because then that puts the so-called progressives into a double bind. They do have to. They still want to attack the firearms owners for owning firearms, but the thing is that the firearms owners are using the exact same verbiage. So this opens them up to accusations of hypocrisy and duplicity. But yeah, the framing has already started by the media. They're already doing that. They're saying that you can't break the law. Now, as we all know, this is basically Calvin Ball. I don't know if anyone remembers Calvin and Hobbes, the cartoon from the 1980s. Calvin and Hobbes featured a little boy that had a stuffed animal tiger, and they would go on adventures and do weird things. And Calvin, the little boy, he would play a game called Calvin Ball. And in Calvin Ball, Calvin got to make up the rules as he went along. So new rules were being made up basically on the spot, and people had to start obeying those rules. That's more or less what's going on. So they're playing Calvin Ball, and they're saying, no, we get to have sanctuary cities, but you don't, and we're going to make up rules that are going to take away your God-given rights. So, again, the idea here with the usage of the term sanctuary city, Second Amendment sanctuary city, that's a genius move. It's the correct move, and we're going to have to start pushing that. Do we have any indication of that?
Do we have any indication of who started that, how that started, the sanctuary city, Second Amendment?
I don't know. I don't know where that started. I've been hearing about this for the past year. There were a lot of counties that flipped to, quote, sanctuary city status in Washington last year, or earlier this year, I forget which, and it was a response to Washington doing the same thing as California. The coastal virus has spread to Oregon and Washington. So they're doing the same thing up there. Up in Washington, you can't own assault weapons. That's what they're going for. Also, this affects people that own 80% lowers and 80% pistols. So this is all-encompassing. For example, here in California, you cannot... you can own an 80% receiver, you just can't drill it out without registering it with the DOJ. And if you try to register it, I mean, I've heard reports of people trying to register their 80% lowers and having them confiscated. So it's a big deal. But anyway, yeah, the sanctuary city thing has actually been going on for quite some time. And Virginia is just the latest and most spectacular. The only reason that I think that Virginia got any kind of attention is because they were going to ban everything and declare no grandfather clause, which does actually mean the possibility for a house-to-house confiscation. Now, they walked that back, which is not a victory. It just means that we don't have to deal with the ATF coming to our house. That's all that it means. Now that they don't have that thing in there, now that they've grandfathered, now that they've been so nice as to grandfather, allow us to own our own property, there's no need for the National Guard to be called. So it's important to understand that this situation is developing very rapidly, and people need to be aware that there are some things that were true like 2 weeks ago that are not true now. There was a report that there was a rumor that the governor was trying to figure out how to cut the internet, telephones, and electricity in the event of confiscations. Now, since the confiscations are no longer scheduled, that's not necessary. So that rumor, and I stress rumor, there's no confirmation on that. It's just a rumor. That rumor is largely moot now. But even still, I don't think it matters, because you still have, firstly, the ban. Okay, that's not good. Secondly, the magazine capacity ban. That's not good. And I think that this will also mean no to 80% lowers. They're calling them ghost guns. And then lastly, the most important is the red flag laws. In Florida, I heard reports of 5 red flags per day being served. And it's not that these are directed at the moment. They're not directed at anyone in particular. It's just that there are criminals out there. And for better or worse, they're going after people that are obvious targets. But the thing is that they're always going to go after the fringe first. And then once they're done with the fringe, they're going to keep going. The point is not to get to the fringe. It's not to get to the criminals. It's to get to us. It's to criminalize us. So with these red flags, they are incredibly dangerous. I could go into theories about that, but it doesn't really matter. Localizing to Virginia again. The idea, I think, was to give a great big shock and see what the reaction was. That's what I mean by a bushwhack. So everything's banned. You don't get to keep anything. There's going to be door-to-door searches. How does the public react? And I think that's part of why it was allowed. The announcement, I mean.
How did the public react?
Boy, howdy. Okay, so it is what it is. I do spend a lot of time on firearms enthusiast channels, and I do check into the preppers now and again, and they're really, really upset. And some of those guys are really serious. Some of them, kind of LARPy, and they're a bit much. But they're very, very, very upset. And some of them are like Fed Post upset. So I think that the people in Virginia, they understand that there would be real pushback. So this is why they walked back to, we're going to ban everything for younger generations, but those who already have them, they get grandfathered in. Okay. Again, this is a highball technique. You give them the worst case scenario, then you walk it back and everyone says, oh, great, we dodged a bullet there. High five. Even though you still get everything else. It's like, I'm going to rob, rape, and murder you. And the person's like, holy crap, don't do that. And they're like, okay, fine, so I won't murder you. You're still getting freaking robbed and raped. So that's basically where Virginia is right now. And they're moving back to the slow boil.
What's the feeling on the ground? And Jason, of course, be curious to hear what you know from the general populace.
So I know one Virginian, and she was pretty upset. And again, like Fed Posty upset. And apparently she knows a couple of people. Well, she's Virginian. But yeah, she knows a couple of people in Virginia that are also borderline Fed Post upset. And these are normies. These are people who are not clued in. These are just regular, like, Republicans, basically.
And so in their worldview or their frame, what they can see, did you get into the whys with her? What is...
No. I
mean, from her perspective, not you explaining the whys. Does she have a why to this? How does she view her government?
She's woke.
Why would this be happening? How would she explain this to someone?
She's really, really woke. She gets it. Okay. So she's fine.
So maybe I misunderstood. I thought you said these were normies, or maybe her friends are normies.
Her friends are normies.
Okay.
And she, like so many people, is finding it difficult to explain and express what's happening in such a way that her friends and family can understand. So, and there's actually a thing that I don't want to call it a solution, because it's not a solution per se, but it is an action that will point people toward a solution. I'll talk about that near the end of the stream, because I want to end on a high note, or something as close to a high note as possible. But yeah, the word on the street is that people are genuinely upset, and this is excellent news, because that means that it's going to be harder for we'll call them petty tyrants for now. It'll be harder for them to force everything through. So that's great news. That's really, really good news. And I honestly wonder how effective it's going to be, because they're already talking now about defunding police departments and sheriff's departments. And that means that we're going to see hard financial attacks. They're going to start attacking people's paychecks, their ability to feed their family. This is a war of attrition, and they are serious. This is not a joke at all. So the feeling on the ground, as far as I can tell, is very serious, and with good reason.
Is there any pushback on the government level?
No. And this is a big problem. So there are a couple of okay. That's actually a good starting point to a point that I want to make, because it's genuinely important. There are no consequences for the tyrants, and that's a big, big problem. Because at the moment they are forcing through legislation that revokes our constitutional protections, that allows us to exercise our God-given rights. And these tyrants, they wish to revoke all of our protections so that they can just do whatever they want. That's the entire point. No Fed posting, but as we all know, the Second Amendment is very specifically about dealing with tyrants. If you take away the only checking mechanism we have, which is simply to repel jackboots, then the tyrants, they can do whatever they want. So they're going to do everything they can to try to force things through, but as soon as they encounter pushback, real pushback that hurts them, then the tyrants, they have to stop and think. No such pushback exists. It's my opinion that, because traditionally the pushback would be taking them out of office and undoing all of their laws and dictates and edicts. That's impossible in California. The reason
because of what we discussed earlier.
What's that?
Because of what we discussed earlier.
Correct.
Demographics.
A lot of people don't understand this, and that's fine. Because people are like, oh my God, California is run by a bunch of terrible liberals and blah, blah, blah. And what are they thinking? It's like, dude, you don't get it, bro. California is 37% white. It's 39% Hispanic, which means that it is lost permanently. It's over. We don't control this state. We just don't. In the very near future, they will start flexing their power. That's just the way that it is. Okay? So, yeah, these guys, they're literally importing a new voter base. They're importing a new population that will support them. So, the idea of doing the traditional thing of voting them out, that doesn't work. In Richmond, you're not going to vote these people out. They already have a voter base that will vote for them 80% of the time. They are there permanently. When I say that this situation is very serious, I mean it. It is very serious. And Virginia does not understand. They don't get it. They're still thinking in terms of Democrats and Republicans. completely failing to understand that this distinction is essentially meaningless now. It genuinely doesn't matter anymore. So this moves into topics of discussion that YouTube doesn't like people to talk about. So I'm trying to be delicate about this, if you understand my meaning. Anyway, yeah, basically there needs to be consequences. And I think that the easiest and best thing to do with regards to these petty tyrants is to chip away at their claims of legitimacy.
You have an interesting thing you gave me in your notes about names. Do you want to share that now for a moment?
Yeah. I was thinking about that a little bit earlier. I went and took a walk and found myself contemplating why the whole name thing was so effective. And it occurred to me that the entire point... Okay, so the governor of Virginia, his name is Governor Ralph Northam. And if you're going to chip away at Ralph Northam's claims of legitimacy, the first thing you do is you stop calling him governor. Notice that I called him Ralph Northam. The reason I called him Ralph Northam is because once you isolate his position, isolate him from his position, then he's just a guy. Are you going to obey just some guy? No, you're not. And note that I didn't call him Ralphie. The reason that I didn't call him Ralphie is because that's a diminutive, and that suggests a special place or a special feeling or sentiment, whether good or bad. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you want to convey that this is just another person, like a spoon or a chair or a lamp. So you just use their name, nothing more, nothing less, and don't give them nicknames. Even though it's funny to say things like Elizabeth Crazy Legs Warren, ha ha ha, it's kind of funny. I would just call her Elizabeth and be done with it. And this works in two directions. Firstly, you isolate the person from claims of power. Secondly, you aren't attacking them. If you attack a person long enough, you actually look bad. Think about all those people that were like, Ronald Blumpf. Those guys look like idiots now. They look hysterical. If they simply referred to him as Donald and nothing more, then that might have a little bit of stinging. And that's why with these petty tyrants, and I think that calling them, I was thinking about that too. I don't want to call them tyrants anymore. I want to call them petty tyrants. The idea is to diminish them as much as is possible. So number one, there is no legitimacy to their power. Number two, I'm going to refer to them in the as something that is less than angering, like just a problem that needs to be dealt with, hence petty tyrant. Anyway, yeah, just call them by their name, Ralph. And if you do that, so help me, they go crazy. I've seen this happen on several occasions. I have watched it and I've done it. If you call a bureaucrat by their first name, do not say Mr., do not say Governor, do not say Esquire, do not say any of those. Just call them by their name. No lieutenant, none of this stuff. Just call them by their first name. They lose their shit. The reason is because they know that you don't recognize their authority anymore. They love power. Deny them that power by refusing to call them anything other than their name.
That touches on media narratives as well.
Yeah.
We can transition into that. But Jason, as our resident Virginian, do you have anything you'd like to share so far? Penny for your thoughts.
Well, I really am enjoying the conversation thus far, and this is a fantastic topic to be addressed, especially because being able to see and identify the damage, when things are happening that we predict will result in XYZ, and then those things manifest. It is absolutely and deeply, profoundly important that we address those things and point out to the public that, yes, indeed, we said these things would happen. This is exactly what happened. And here are the things we said in the past that also came true. And here are the things that we say are going to come to fruition in the future if we continue on this track. And it's really important. How do we talk to, whether you're in Virginia or elsewhere? How do we talk to our loved ones? Well, we have a little program here for doing that. You need to let them know that it isn't, as Ecce is pointing out, it's not about a Republican or Democrat. It has nothing to do with those things. And a lot of those folks are going to be very difficult to just pull them out of that swamp. But that is what we have to do. This is about our people and the anti-whites of all races, religions, creeds, etc., who want to victimize us and who are victimizing us, who are going and are in power in various places. Their power is increasing. Their power is unopposed, as is the case in Virginia now, as is the case in California. And without any opposition to that power, what do you think is going to happen? We are in the anti-white narrative, painted as the bad guys, the adversaries, the antagonists, the evildoers of all time, when they have absolute power to do whatever they want to us. They will do whatever they want to us. And that is the kind of thing that every one of our brothers and sisters out there is going to be able to understand, even though on the surface they might want to resist it, because what they know that it means. It means that you are going to show some concern for white people. And when they begin to resist because they are implicitly revealing that, wait a second, if I show concern for white people, then I'm immoral. That is when you go for the jugular and you say, what kind of ideology are we living by where it is immoral to care about the well-being of our own people? Why are you feeling uncomfortable right now? Why is this something that is troubling for you, difficult for you? We are the founding stock of this nation. It is ours, and we have every right to control the destiny of that nation. We clearly do not. And as a consequence, and we haven't in a long time, as a consequence, hordes of wonderful doctors, lawyers, judges, surgeons, everything have been brought into the country from other places around the globe that vastly disproportional for their representation vote anti-white with everything that they do. And in fact, succeeding generations vote more anti-white than the first generations do. I guess that's because they're still wary of the messaging from their countries that America, I remember back when I was a child and the new non-whites coming to the country would say to me, well, you all white people, you're the only real Americans. The rest of us, we're just here and you're allowing us to be here. They don't feel that way after being here for a handful of years. They change their mind and suddenly they have a claim to everything that is ours and a victimization of somewhere in the past, no matter how fantastic. And by the way, I'll just say this, we're not going to talk about it tonight, but I have predicted on these streams, some of you will remember, and long before making any streams, I predicted that since this is just a narrative, the anti-white narrative, that whenever the anti-whites needed another Holocaust, needed another tragedy, need another mass murder to white guilt our people, to inflict MPs on us and just sink us and drown us in white noir, well, they'll just write it up out of whole cloth. And we just had another revelation of one of these the past few days ago. So this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with. And when we look at Virginia, we see the actual tangible outcome, this approaching apartheid, where we already have laws and policies on the books that legally discriminate against our people, unethically, immorally, but nonetheless discriminate. But as I've pointed out before, it's not the actual laws and policies, but it's the fact that you have an anti-white morality that informs the application of all rules, policies, and laws. And all rules, policy, and laws are either magnified or diminished or thrown out, I guess, per whether they serve anti-whiteism, victimizing white people, benefiting non-whites to the detriment of our people or not. And so that's how everything is interpreted. And now we have a case where Virginia, a solid state where people were conservative. Of nearly everyone you knew was conservative. You travel across the state, and we have still traces. It's going to be gone now. It's all going to be gone. We still have traces of the Highland Southern accent. It's beautiful Southern accent that is native to the state of Virginia. The same accent that people like Tom Jefferson, Robert E. Lee, that they spoke with, and all of that is going to be gone because of what the anti-whites have done. How have we gotten here? We've gotten here because our people have allowed themselves to be victimized, to be infected with mean pathogens, to be white guilted, and they are surrendering election after election, increasing power, ceding increasing power, especially because so many of our people, primarily our women, but men as well, think that, well, if you just give them more, it'll pacify them. Just pacify them a little more. Let's just make sure that everybody gets along. And meanwhile, you have people, both men and women, but primarily men, saying, look, if we follow this trend into the future, we see that we're going to end up with a Virginia, that the entire government in Virginia is anti-white. And then they're going to begin inflicting crimes on us that are more bloody, more acrimonious, more evil than we have ever seen before. And we are entering that phase, something absolutely predictable, something in all of these organizations that I've helped with or been a member of and led and participated in, that all of these organizations we've been talking about all along, passing out thousands and thousands and thousands of flyers to people talking about this sort of thing. And yet, they chose to close their ears. They chose to close their eyes, to cover their ears. They chose to put their head in the sand, because to look at these sorts of things meant that you could be called an anti-white slur. And that meant that you were the antagonist. You were the bad guy in the anti-white narrative. And you would rather surrender. These people would rather surrender their destiny, the safety, the law and order, the civility, all of Western civilization, everything handed down to us. They would rather surrender all of that than be called an ugly name, because the ugly name means that they are the bad guy. Now, what we're seeing in Virginia is that these anti-whites are fanatically. Now, I predict what's most likely going to happen, and what I believe we see in California is that the anti-whites are reined in a bit. They are more powerful entities will sweep in. They will take this religious fervor of anti-whiteism, which these people are fired up with. Let's get this revenge on the white race. Now's our time. We have to disarm them. We've got to get this revenge now. Let's cut their heads and hands off now. They're going to sweep in and they're going to say, not yet. Because if you go as bloodthirsty as you would like to go right away, then it's going to make it impossible for us to achieve these anti-white objectives in other states. It's going to make it very difficult, because the white people in these other places are going to get really nervous when they see white people fleeing from Virginia with their belongings in hand, and they look over their shoulders, and what do they see? They see a teeming non-white population driving luxury cars, living in $700,000 houses, and they say, oh my God. And those non-white people, they're not your one great non-white buddy who's going to also vote to keep your right of self-defense, your freedom of speech. No, these are people who are saying, we are coming for the revenge. We're going to vote for that revenge. We're going to have it one way or another. They don't want to see that. The bigger players, the bigger anti-white elites would not like to see that. But them not liking to see it doesn't mean that they'll necessarily be able to rein this in. This is part of the event horizon materializing for us, because this is the sort of thing, once you have whipped the people up and you have driven them in a direction like the bull that you have whipped up with pain and torture, and you have aimed him in a direction, he's running through everything in front of him. The same thing holds true for these anti-whites. So they're going to try, the anti-whites, I predict, behind the scenes to try to rein this in a little bit, but they may not be able to do that. What's going to happen at the state level? Sure, you have at the county level and at the city level. Virginia is, I think, 95 counties and then a couple dozen independent cities in the state, and already 80 plus some, I think, of the counties are saying that we're not going to enforce these laws of taking people's right of self-defense away. And so what does we hear the rumors of the governor saying, well, maybe use the militia. And then I was messaged early this morning and on some people know who I was doing work with at 3 hours of sleep, but messaged early this morning that some content producers were talking about in white positive sphere and outside, saying, well, we have this kind of thing has never happened before, the militia being used, and then county sheriffs saying they're going to deputize people to stop this from happening. This is the Civil War. No, it's not. And this has happened before. Just pick up the history book. I know some people they maybe are a little afraid of reading or whatever it might be. Maybe there are videos on these things, and you can look back and see Mississippi. You can see Alabama. You can see where the governor in Alabama called out the state troopers of that state to stand up against the militia, which had been federalized in order to achieve anti-white objectives in that state. Who do you think was going to win that contest if they had actually started shooting? The people with the tanks and the machine guns and the helicopters and the recourse to other military assets directly from the United States or other states nearby Alabama, or the police officers who might have, a couple little gadgets here and there to maybe take on the local gangs or in the state or what have you, but nothing compared to the militia. And so what has happened every time? The state has had to back down. What would happen if it got to that? And it won't. And I'll tell you why. But what would happen if they called out the militia in Virginia and some counties decided, well, we're going to resist, or some folks out somewhere, they want to form a militia. And by the way, I will warn you all, if you are going to form a militia, don't tell anyone, because they will red flag everything away from you overnight. So any desire to form a militia, it doesn't matter what it says in the documentation. Please listen to this. Please share this with good people out there that are, America-loving patriots. You don't want to see them have all of their right of self-defense taken away. Some of them have tens of thousands of dollars worth of beautiful firearms. Some of them meant for business. Some of them meant for fun. Some of them meant for the mantle. You don't want to see all of that taken away from them because they say, well, this paper here, this paper says I can have a militia, and by God, we're going to form one. Well, if you're going to do that, then only do it with the people you already know. Don't tell anyone else. You better make it as hush-hush as possible, because we are going to be reading about good people having the feds show up, red flag style, taking firearms away. If the feds aren't able to do it by way of a Virginian law, then these anti-whites that run the Virginia government will make it happen like this. Don't doubt that for 1 minute. There's no opposition. But they won't need to take out the militia. Why bother? Why bother? Because if the anti-whites, at some point, they'll get smart and they'll say, wow, there would be shooting, there would be bloodshed. The other people, other founding stock white folks out there of founding stock of the United States, they might get their dander up if they see us machine gunning down a bunch of people with the infantry from the state. So what will probably end up happening is they're going to rework things, and they'll say, okay, we're going to have registration, or we'll have confiscation, or we'll have all of this to come in the future if we don't recapture our destiny. And then they'll say, okay, well, we believe, Paul over there has guns. He hasn't registered those guns. So when you don't register your guns, we're going to start garnishing your wages. So if you don't register your guns, you're going to receive these bills in the mail. It's going to be this sort of thing. And then how will people respond? Then they'll have to just flee out of the state. There won't be an opportunity. The anti-whites would be infinitely stupid to march and roll tanks down streets in 2020 or 2021 when all they have to do is send bills. All they have to do is garnish wages. And they're going to, trust me, I said in junior high school, I said the day will come, if we don't recapture our destiny, that the anti-whites in government will just vote our vehicles out of our driveways. They'll just vote our paid for mortgages right out from under our asses. And they'll say, here are the reasons why your race is so evil that we're going to vote for all of this to happen. So I think it's going to happen a bit differently. Now, when it comes to Bill Lend and the folks, talking about fourth generation warfare, you have a lot of folks talking about fourth generation warfare. How exactly it could possibly happen, what exactly it is. even when it comes to fourth generation warfare. By the way, I worked with Bill Lind, the creator of this idea. I sat in his office and we had numerous long conversations. Bill Lind and me. You look at the names on those books that the people say, this brilliant man, off the charts, genius. This is the guy behind this. He's the one who's done the series, the heavy lifting. He's the one who's done the heavy intellectual work. Sat in his office day after day and had conversations with this gentleman. So I'm not unfamiliar to this, not unfamiliar to the topic. Even with fourth generation warfare, you still need a center of gravity. So these folks who hunger for civil war, certainly nobody here wants anything like that. We object to that. But these folks who are hungering for civil war, and they want to throw out this term and attach it to their idea that it's just this wild free-for-all, somebody on this street over there doing one thing, somebody in that city over there doing something else. And then they want to just attach this name of fourth generation warfare to it because they think it'll legitimize this idea of this giant free-for-all, and somehow it ends up defeating an organized oppression, which is asinine as can be. Fourth generation warfare is not that whatsoever. You still have centers of gravity. You still have ideology. You still have organizational structure and the sending out of marching orders, etc. You can't have total randomness. And what's more important is that even if magically you could have a group of spontaneous human combustion, you could have a spontaneous fourth generation warfare come into being, what are you going to have? You're not going to have a group of people who are hardened by going free, because they don't have that yet. You're going to have a group of people that believe that the based and non-white people are the exact same as us. And so it doesn't matter if half the population is non-white. It would still be America. We would still have a constitution. That would be the people that would be sitting on top of the tanks. That would be the people who would be waving the stars and stripes at that time. And do you really think that that's going to give you the kind of America, that's going to give all of us the kind of place where we will be able to survive? Absolutely not. So what am I seeing? I live in one of the cesspits of Virginia, which is Northern Virginia. Well, and say something, we still have good people showing up at the county government, which, by the way, is a multi-million-dollar building. Is absolutely many millions. Absolutely colossal structure. I've been in it a number of times, and very posh. They have a lot of money up here. It's very wealthy counties up in Northern Virginia. And because it's federal money pouring in, this is what you've always seen, by the way, when empires, when they begin to collapse. It's always the area right around the capital gets wealthier and wealthier, and elsewhere, aside from maybe a few outposts that are part of that power structure, gets poorer and poorer. That's what you have here in Northern Virginia, right outside the nation's capital of the United States, Virginia, on the Virginia side. And so what do you see? You do have some people going out there that are good folks, especially there are a lot of law enforcement and white people who work in the government. They come from like Idaho, and they come from Montana, and they come from good places. Some of them come from Virginia, and they're going to the county seat of power and objecting to what's going on. They want the county to resist this sort of thing. We're gonna have to see what ends up happening. But the important thing, I think, here is that we need to be thinking about how to get our friends and family to go free of anti-whiteism. Because as Ecce brilliantly points out, it's not about Democrat and Republican. They're both going to deliver you to perdition. So it's about those who are white positive and those who are anti-white. And we need to reach our people as quickly as possible, because the day may very well come. The context may very well come. We can't see the future, but the context may very well come where they decide, the anti-whites, have so much power, so much religious fervor behind the revenge against Western kind, that things do get quite ugly. And if they do get quite ugly, we are going to need an ideology, a set of dialectics and lexicon that will wed us, irrespective of what particular city we are in a state, or county in a state, or whatever it might be, that will wed us on these ideas, that will preserve us, that we can build on top of all of those means of self-defense. The final thing I'll say as I pass it back, and then directly to Jared's question, what am I seeing? Northern Virginia, absolute produce and consume. Nobody is, I'm not seeing anybody show the least bit of worry about what could possibly happen. They are just deep in, I mean, this is anti-white territory, in rapidly becoming majority non-white and anti-white. And they're walking around with smiles on their faces, white erasing Christmas, white erasing our statues, white erasing our rights, white erasing our founding documents, white erasing everything that we care about, and replacing it with anything that smears and slanders and is the exact inverse of all that we create, is the exact inverse of our biosphere. How can they let us remain? Even those white anti-whites, how can they be allowed to remain when the goal of anti-whiteism is the inverse of the biospirit of Western kind? They won't be able to fake it well enough. They'll get eradicated as well, just as all of those white allies, those anti-whites down in South Africa, just as the white anti-whites in Rhodesia, they too had their families, and increasingly so, families gang raped, ritualistically murdered, little babies, little children, all ritualistically murdered by these anti-whites, just drooling with desire to revenge themselves on the ne'er-do-well in the anti-white narrative. The final thing I'll say is this, and so I spoke to Jared's question directly. The final thing I'll say is this: there is an individual who has a news website, and he is turning out news about what's going on in Virginia right now. His name is Hal Turner, and I believe he's still in jail. He was an FBI asset. Don't listen to anything that piece of trash has to say. I don't care if he's saying stuff that is truthful now, some of it true, some of it not. He was in the white positive sphere years and years ago, had a little radio station, said a lot of things that got a lot of people excited, a lot of people talking with him, dedicated to him, showing up at rallies. He's like this 5 foot tall, massively barrel-chested guy from like up in New Jersey or something. I met him in person at a conference, and very shifty. I know why he's so shifty now, because he was around a bunch of people that he was trying to send to jail. He made threats against federal officials, judges, and the like. And then finally, one of those states said, no, we're not going to allow you to threaten our judge. Him saying things like, well, that judge needs to be, and then insert some awful conclusion to that person's life. And he would say that kind of garbage and somehow not go to jail all the time. And this was like one of those honeypot traps. Anyhow, this state reached out, arrested him, and when they brought him in for trial, his FBI handlers were with him. So yeah, he still ended up going to jail, even though he had his buddies with him. And of course, everybody that reached out and talked to this guy about, yeah, these violent deeds or whatever, they need to be done, guaranteed that they fell under suspicion of the federal government and state governments. Who knows what happened to them? Maybe some of them disappeared under the various laws that the United States has now to make people just poof out of existence. So watch out for that guy. And I'll pass it back to you two so we can get on with this stellar conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for myself, Jared, or specifically Ecce, because this is our great opportunity to have the mind of this brilliant person with us today, please tag Jared or myself on either of the YouTube channels. I will take a look at D Live, and hopefully I will remember to open that chest up at the end. But if there's anything I said that either of you would like to comment to, please do comment to it, because these are important topics and we need to be addressing these things soberly so we can have and we can assemble a pragmatic program to get from where we are today to where we would like to be, rather than this do we go out into the hills of Virginia and put up hunting towers just in case, and how many, silly stuff. So let's talk about things that are serious and what can actually serve our people. We don't want to end up with a Virginia that is utterly oppressed by a bunch of bewildered white people that have no idea what's really going on, still scratching their heads. Why is it that those anti-white, or why those Democrats, they say they're for this, but then they just, nothing makes sense to me. Let's not have anyone in your lives say that around you ever again. I pass it back to these two gentlemen.
Well, it's great to hear you speak so passionately about your home state of Virginia and frame it. I enjoyed that and learned a few things. Virginia, a state I've visited many times in my life, beautiful place since childhood. But Ecce, we have media and then some ways forward to still discuss. But shall we get to that, or was there anything specific from what Jason said you'd like to address first?
Yeah, actually, he did touch on something that I do think is kind of important. I don't remember the exact phrasing, so I'm going to skip that. But basically, it comes to a legitimacy issue, and if you think about it from a certain standpoint, any government that is actively hostile to the population it purports to represent is an illegitimate government. So what I'm saying is pretty serious, and everything that I'm saying limits it just to me and no one else. Okay, I'm not saying that anyone else believes this. Okay, but the thing is that once you get into that mindset, well, we do have a government that is openly ethnically cleansing us in our own country. By definition, that's hostility. I would say that if one wanted to be a hardliner about it, that means that the legitimacy crisis has come and gone. And right now, if you think about it in terms of public perception, the Democrats have decided that they are going to declare sanctuary cities. So they're openly defying the U.S. federal government immigration laws. So that's the legitimacy crisis has come and gone. They don't believe, here in California, they don't believe that the federal government is legitimate. Then you look at Virginia, same thing. The legitimacy crisis has come and gone. I honestly do believe that we are at the end of empire. Once you believe that we're at the end of empire, a lot of this is shadow games. And what we're watching is a new paradigm manifesting in front of us. And it's incredibly painful and it sucks, but one has to take the long view on it. I have to go in a couple of minutes. I'm sorry to say. I have a couple of things that I got to do that are actually a little bit important. I'm sorry, but this is an important topic. I'd love to, chit chat with you guys again at some point. Because I kind of want to ask Jason a little bit about the, his thoughts specifically on Virginia, his experiences. So before I go though,
we could do a part 2 soon for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
we said we'd go about an hour tonight, but it's a big topic, and I can see the people in the chat want to hear more of this perspective. So we'll set something up soon.
But this is a really important thing because Virginia is just the latest in a series. It's the most spectacular because of the threats of the confiscations. It will not be the last. Everyone needs to get that through their head. They're talking about doing this in Kentucky. They're talking about doing this in Washington. They're talking about doing this everywhere. Okay. It's going to get very serious. Okay, so with the legitimacy crisis come and gone, the only consequence that I can think of for the petty tyrants is to chip away at their legitimacy. And the sanctuary city is a good place to start. There's more to say on this, but again, I got to let out. But I would say that a great thing to do, I'm very serious about this, take the long view. The gun thing is only possible because of demographics. We need to make demographics the core issue of 2020. And the reason for now this is just me saying this is what I think. Okay, other people might disagree, but that's fine. I'm saying that I think that it should be a core issue for 2020. And the reason is because we're setting up for 2024. When Trump is out, that means that the Electoral College will go to Democrats permanently. Texas goes blue in 2024. They're going to move into revenge mode. Okay, they're trying to meme a Bolshevik revolution into existence. And that's why you have all these TV shows about, the resistance and blah, blah, blah. Everyone's a Nazi and all this good stuff. They're trying to set up a long game so that they can talk about having a Bolshevik revolution, tank the economy, and then blame the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, the kulaks, and so on, and then have your little revolution. Anyway, that's what they're thinking about doing after they get the presidency permanently as of 2024. They're just going to raid the corpse of what America used to be. If we get ahead of that, and if we make demographics a talking point right now, that means we can revisit it in 2024, and we will have had 4 years of even more of this going on. So I think that we need to be thinking in the long view, firstly. Secondly, I think that we need to be, because if we are capable of making these predictions, that means that people are going to start listening to us on a longer timeline. We need to get ahead of this now. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to pop by, say hi. I got to let out. I'm really sorry about that, guys.
No, it's all right. It was a quick after hours, and definitely wets my whistle, and I'm sure the audience's whistle, to have you back on again soon.
Jason, I want to go ahead and just throw it out there. I really do want to hear what you have to say about your experiences in Virginia. So I would like to, I don't want you to get too personal with your friends and your family, because that's, delicate topic, but I would at some point like to hear about it, because I genuinely foresee Virginia as being something that we look back on as a very important flashpoint. Whether or not these laws go through is a separate issue, but the fact that this is even being proposed at all is highly significant. So all eyes are on Virginia right now, as far as I'm concerned, and I very much want to hear about on-the-ground stuff. Anyway, guys, I'm sorry.
It's been an honor having you tonight, and we'll have you back for a part 2. And continue with the great information that you have to share with us. And I will happily talk about my experiences here in Virginia.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to let you
all right,
we'll
brother.
Talk soon. Thank you for coming on. And I guess we'll just do a little housekeeping and then pop off ourselves. But we'll talk soon.
All right. Sorry. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. All right.
All right.
Have a good one. Thank you.
See you later, brother. We just that was a great discussion. This is such an important topic, and it deserves. I just noticed. Porridge asking if Virginians have an accent. If you hear one on me, I would be surprised. But yes, the accent here was what was referred to as Highland Southern, and you can still find it in a couple of places. It's kind of the musical version of the Southern drawl. And,
it's very distinguished, right? I feel like we could probably YouTube a video of a classic Highland Virginian accent, right?
Yes, probably so. We could find one. It
I
definitely.
wonder if people hear any slight differences between the way you and I speak.
Well, that's a good question. Do you?
I think you and I speak generally and you could debate if this is a good thing or a bad thing, I suppose, but a generally middle American, standard American accent at this point.
I think so. I think so as well. I think Unwashed put a little bit of a kind of like a almost maybe an accent from Alabama on me when he did me a little bit here and there. And that probably sounds about right for his ear. But it otherwise was a perfect no white guilt that he did.
That was funny. Yes. Unwashed from Britain doing his impersonation, some of you might be aware, and he actually is going to be our tap guest this week. It's looking like it's going to be at 4 Eastern. We're trying to get it right in there between a couple of the millennials that day, but 4 Eastern, 9 UK on Thursday. We'll be joined by Unwashed and hear his story. He recently got fired, and some news on the ground from the UK. He's an up-and-coming guy, and Mark was aware of him. We wanted to talk to him. So that's one bit of news. Did you have any housekeeping you needed to do, Jason?
Yes, I think we have some super chats, and we have here Pamela very early in the show tonight. Thank you, my dear lady. coming in with $9.99 on YouTube and writing some serious urgency now. I'm here to do more than my share, carrying the message in North Idaho. So thank you very much for that, Pamela. And Pamela made that video a couple weeks back introducing everyone to herself and her lovely kitchen there. It was about as cozy as a kitchen and home could be. Thank you for sharing that, Pamela. And thank you very much for that kind super chat. Machiavelli Sucks also is here. Again, another wonderful participant in the service to White Wellbeing, $1.99. Thank you dearly. And writing today on YouTube that private central banking is the root of evil / problem. So thank you very much for that, Machiavelli Sucks. Indeed, there's no doubt about when the Federal Reserve came into existence, and the power to print the money is all the power in the world. And that was certainly when things began going astray. Now let me check over here and see what else there might be. We just had JK160. Thank you very much, kind sir. Super chatting $5. If you want to see how insane the Virginia government is, just about 6 months ago, the Dems wanted to legalize post-birth abortion. Indeed, they did, JK160. It was absolutely monstrous. Everybody was talking about it at that time because of how absolutely sadistic it is. This is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for that, JK160. And then I will read. I have another, looks like, yes, we have a Ko-fi super chat that I will read in one moment. This is the thing that I talked about all the way back in 7th and 8th grade, junior high school, when I started fighting for our people. And that is, I realized that if we live in a democracy and they keep importing people, they keep bringing in the lovely astronauts and everything else, the people who cured cancer and everything else that they bring in over the these border crossers, eventually they will outnumber us. And even before, though, they outnumber us, their vote, which is almost entirely an anti-white vote, combined with the white anti-whites, who for various reasons also vote anti-white, will displace all of the power that we have over our destiny. And once they do that, there is nothing to stop their hand. They don't put Christianity ahead of anti-whiteism. I said something similar about the capitalism, this laissez-faire capitalism, that the only thing that stayed the hands of your basic capitalist, laissez-faire capitalist, was Christianity, or I guess, i.e., the morality of, or the biospirit, the general morality and biospirit of our people coming down through the expression through that religion. And so they would say, well, I'm not actually going to maybe use John Gotti as somebody to sell my products because that's just immoral. And then they wouldn't do it. But as you can see, I was able to say, and you all can see this, I'm sure, that if you just remove that, if this morality is no longer a impediment to the thirst and hunger for wealth and power, then they will be interviewing or using John Gotti's dead now, of course, this former mob boss. If you didn't know who this was, ladies and gentlemen, just think of Al Capone. Al Capone today would be a celebrity. They would absolutely adore him. The big companies, I'm sure Facebook would use him to push their products because there is no morality, there is no ethic anymore. It is the morality and ethic of anti-whiteism. So the same applies to everything else when it comes to governance and society. Once they have the power, what do? I could say this when I was 11. When I was 11, I said what we see now happening in the state of Virginia. The anti-whites have taken full power because of the importation of non-white peoples who will vote overwhelmingly anti-white. And all of this is provable data. Of course, please check with the walrus at YouTube to see if it's correct or not, because it may or may not be right. And those anti-white walruses get to decide what's right. So they vote overwhelmingly, and they
magical walruses working at YouTube. This is news to me.
Well, they usually have pink hair, and they always have a mustache, male or female. And
see.
they blurred out underneath that mustache the what's real and what's not, and it's always conforms with the anti-white narrative perfectly. Just magic how that happens.
There are these demigods sitting there in San Francisco. That's fascinating.
Yes. So, and now we see it. For God's sake, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the time. And this is something that Jared, George, and I feel very passionately about. This is what you're going to get that's very different from other places in the white positive sphere. And that is actual deeds, acts, thoughts, things that we can do to correct our situation, to correct our plight. We are approaching the event horizon. We are approaching things beginning to spiral out of control because the anti-whites, with their religious fervor of anti-whiteism, pushing for things like this, pushing for worse, pushing for the post-birth abortions and everything else that is going to come to fruition because they have all the power and there's nothing to stay their hand. We have to be getting to our brothers and sisters out there with the doctrine of going free ASAP. Every day that we waste is a day that never comes back, is a day that if we waste it, you might as well see that leering menace rising up over the horizon of Zimbabwe and South Africa for us, Saint Domingo for us. That is Haiti. That is our future. You're not going to be able to run anywhere anymore. There's no more running. Now, that doesn't mean you don't move to a better area where you're more secure to carry on helping folks go free. Certainly you do that. But there's nowhere else in the world to run. The anti-whites run all of our countries. We need to spread this doctrine so that as things, or if things actually come to coming apart, if there is a dystopian collapse, that the people who show up to either, I guess, like the cavalry coming over to help us fight for our parcel of land or whatever it might be, when they drive up over the hill in that tank, that they're thinking just like we are thinking, that they want a secure environment for Western kind, just like we want for Western kind. We don't want people pulling up over the hill in a tank. We don't want an environment where things begin to implode in a dystopian, hellish world. We definitely don't want that, period. But we definitely don't want that to happen and then have a multiracial cast show up and say, we're the America. The anti-white narrative still rules in the body of this new America, and you're going to continue being white erased. That is not the destiny that we want for our people. So no set of precepts, no written out dogma for a political party or a new flag or any of these things are going to enable what we want to happen. Only a new and entirely new mindset, a people that is willing to write their own story rather than live by the story written by someone else, written by people who hate us. So we have a super chat here from Johnny Boomer. And he over on Ko-fi, $12. Thank you very much, my good friend, here in the wee morning hours of December. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you very much, my good friend. $12.
Johnny Boomer was one of the contributors to the contest that Parge and I just wrapped up, and Parge, under his Ruination Media account, is with us tonight in the chat. Good to see you there, brother.
Yeah, he's doing great things. Well, let's go ahead and get your final thoughts, Jared, and we'll see if anybody else has any quick questions. Hansa says some Virginians used to have some old English accent. A bit, yeah, especially out on the peninsula. There was some of that. You go into the valley, and regrettably, the valley used to be so pristine that I heard, whether true or not, that Peter Jackson considered using it for footage for Lord of the Rings. And but then it ended up having too many roads for them to have to digitally erase, too many towns to have to digitally erase. And just now they're importing wave after wave after wave of non-white peoples from distant lands, wave after wave. And it's like it's like having, if you try to imagine, ladies and gentlemen, watching the environment change, it's kind of like, imagine if, I got to come up with like a good visual. Imagine if in your backyard, you had out the bird feeder, and you had maybe white doves, a half a dozen white doves that would just frequent the bird feeder every now and again. White doves, these beautiful little birds coming in, and they would feed, and they would send out their call, and they're lovely as can be. And they absolutely were in harmony with the landscape, because there weren't too many of them, and they're angelic looking, and you loved seeing them every day. And then wave after wave of filthy looking starlings just came in, wave after wave, wave after wave. And then it got to the point where all you saw in your yard were these black and brown and speckled, that looks like dirt on them, and these very pointed, sharp, fearsome beaks. And they're everywhere, and they're covering your lawn. They're covering everything in their feces. They are crowding out the doves at the bird feeder. They're crowding out the little doves at the bird bath, stabbing them with those sharp beaks. I've actually seen starlings doing this, ganging up and stabbing with their sharp beaks. And you see those doves less and less as a consequence, until you see them no more. And the landscape is utterly changed because the arrival of the starlings. That is what it's like to be here in Virginia. Now, as I say, I imagine that some of these, I know it has to be a fact, some of these non-white people coming into Virginia are marvelous people. They love America. They heard or read about America, and or they were born here after a generation or two or whatever, and they love America. They want the things like rule of law, Constitution, Bill of Rights, all of this to remain in effect. They want that America to continue. They want white America to continue. There are obviously these people. Regrettably, there are far, far too few of them. Regrettably, looking out into that yard of all of those starlings, hundreds maybe in your yard, there are going to be a handful of starlings that aren't going to crowd out, that aren't going to stab, that aren't going to, but it doesn't matter, not in a democracy. And that is what we have ended up with. So any final words, Jared, and we'll see if there are any final questions and or super chats. And then Jared and I are going to be crashing so that we can start again tomorrow at dawn.
I've just enjoyed listening to the both of you tonight. So I look forward to Ecce being back and developing this story even more. It's very important to be keeping our eye on this. I don't think I have to tell anyone listening why. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping. We mentioned TAP already is looking like it's 4 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock UK on Saturday. That's with Unwashed. Also, my interview with Tim Murdoch of White Rabbit Radio, the public version, is now up. So there's another part that's longer than the public version that's behind the paywall. So please go to whiterabbitradio.net. I think it's White Rabbit Radio. I'll check for you. But with the tweets, it's right there. You can get behind the paywall and see the whole thing, because it really gets juicy in that second half. But there's the 40-minute or so version that is public, and it is up on YouTube. Now he just put it up. And it's just kind of an overview of where I come from. He starts with an interesting question of, where do you get the name The Great Order? And so we talk some bigger picture stuff about what I'm doing and how I came to all this. It's a great interview. Tim's a great guy to talk to, and I thank him for that. And he'll definitely be on the show when he can. Yes, it is whiterabbitradio.net. So please consider supporting them and the good work they're doing. Also, Jason and I will be together on Millennial. And this is fitting because 2 fateful years ago, Millennial 2017 was the first shot across the bow that had us become aware of one another. So we're actually doing it together as TAP this year. And that's going to be on Saturday, December 28th. It'll be Saturday in the States at 7 p.m. So that's a great time. But it is midnight. It's just becoming midnight on the 19th, as Saturday becomes technically Sunday morning in Britain. But Jason and I both agree it's not really the next day until you go to bed and wake up. We've had that discussion, right? Like after it's midnight and someone says to you, they're talking about something later and they say, oh yeah, today, like let's say it's that Saturday midnight and they're talking about something that's happening Sunday at 5 o'clock and they're saying, oh yeah, that's happening later today. No, that's still tomorrow, man. That's why Jason and I get along, because we know it's not tomorrow until you go to bed and wake up. Very important there. But yeah, that is a bit of housekeeping. Please do, of course, share the Watch Live Now link, the page on our site, theafterparty.tv, where you can watch these streams right there on our site. Entropy just pushed out some updates, so hopefully it is getting easier and easier for people to use. We're still working on a few things. And also, please sign up to the newsletter, the Keep Up to Date page as well. We sent out a first mailing, just a very simple hello. Some of you we saw did not opt in. You do get an opt-in email, so check that out. But please tell other people if you're signed up already. Please encourage other people, because as all of this cat and mouse game continues, we have so much more control, relative at least to social media accounts, over our site, theafterparty.tv, and this mailing list that we have. That's how we can directly communicate with you. Much more control over that as opposed to our social media accounts. So if you're on it, please tell others. If you're not, please get on it. That's the Keep Up to Date page. You can sign up to our newsletter. And my Red Ice video for the Christmas Yule season will be out within the next couple of days. I think they're also going to play it during their Yule special this Saturday night.
Nice.
And that would be the 21st on the solstice. Speaking of Henrik, I may or may not be able to make that. I have some conflicts that evening, but they're at least going to play the new Yule Christmas video I did for them. That'll be premiering probably over the next couple of days. Henrik and I were just working on it right before I got on air tonight. But that is a little bit from me. Everybody, of course, my own site is thegreatorder.com. It's a catalog of everything I do. And speaking of cataloging, we're almost done cataloging all of the TAP episodes going back to February of 2018. Soon we'll have the whole catalog up on theafterparty.tv. There's more to get up, the going free streams. It's a work in progress, but that it is the great library of everything we do and things you do as well. Songs and remixes,
Right.
things. It's popular to take speeches Jason does and people put music to it and make it more inspirational, add graphics and music. So we have a community page for you all as well. So if you're creative and something fits with what we're doing, you may well end up on our site as well. And Jason premieres a lot of those videos, the music and the different speeches on his site as well, on his YouTube channel. You may see it often on Friday nights now. That's becoming a bit of a thing. So this is we're all in this together. You know, we have a great community here because you all have agency and you guys are proactive. When I wrote the article about the contest that Parj and I did, and again, Parj is in the audience tonight, I mentioned that. I made sure to mention that. That was published, Countercurrents, Defend Europa. It's going to be in physical form in the upcoming issue, the fall-winter issue, issue 2 of White People's Quarterly. I made sure to mention how much agency we have, how much agency and creativity that this community here has. You're not just sitting there listening to live streams. I was saying that in the context of the wonderful amount of money spontaneously that came in to make those prize funds so much bigger than they started out as with that contest. So we thank you for that. We love you all. And I'll pass it to Jason to take us out for this evening.
Well, thank you very much, my dear friend and colleague. And thank you for mentioning that you appeared with Tim and the folks over there, because I know they're doing great work. So, yeah, check those people out. Make sure you watch Jared's appearance, because you know it's going to be interesting. We have a couple other Super Chats over on Cash App, actually. We have Snow Duchess Super Chatting $10. Thank you, my fair lady. And writing, "We will win." We absolutely will. Thank you so much. And Zero Talon over there on Cash App, Super Chatting $10 as well. Thank you so much for those $10 and writing, "Do something good with this money for our people." Well, that we can promise you. That is the easiest promise I've ever been able to make. We also have SSII $5 here on YouTube. Thank you very much for that super chat and writing, "Good discussion." Let's do this, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just have a quick glance at the remainder of the possible options for where you could super chat and make sure I don't miss any. And if I do, we'll make sure that we mention you next time. I think we have everybody now. And nothing came through. We did have 5 people on Entropy, it looks like, but so we had some folks watching. But let's do this, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to be frequenting some other content producers over the next week or so before we get back together here in an after hours and or otherwise talking about Virginia and what's taking place here. And I want you to participate in the discussion that these people are having. If they're saying things like great civil war, or they're saying other sort of destructive things that you know are not actually going to benefit us in a real, tangible way, I want you to engage them maturely. I want you to say that you understand that they have this desire for this Hail Mary, this great last hope, and suddenly everything is going to be better, and there won't be any difficult time. There's suddenly going to be this rising, this magical. Say you understand where that childish desire is coming from, but there is something that we can actually do. And then introduce them to go free. Introduce them to this process. Introduce them to the service of White Wellbeing. And then come back when we get together again to discuss what's happening in Virginia, whether it's on an after hours or wherever it is. Come back with those interactions. Tell us about how those conversations went. Maybe even the content producers decided they were going to ban you from their channel because you weren't as exuberant about warfare and not being able to get your medications, or your loved ones not being able to get their medications and then abruptly dying because they're medications they need, or something of this nature, or just otherwise engaging in ideas that are going to continue to perpetuate the scenario and the context that we have today, because they're going to do nothing to halt it. So let us know about those conversations. We always like to hear about your victories and your challenges. And if you write me in the comments and you have one of these stories to tell, you don't know exactly maybe what to say, just ask, and I will, if I can get a minute, I will speak to text as quickly as I can and give you some advice on how to handle the conversations. And having said that, I look forward to those questions and stories. And Jared and I will see you again really soon. We love you all. Bye-bye now.